My name is Nathan, and I gave everything to build my family's small coffee shop into a multi-million-dollar empire, only to discover the devastating truth: they never saw me as family at all. Because I wasn't their real son. And that secret would cost me everything I'd worked for, but this time I wasn't leaving empty-handed. To Anderson's Coffee and to the exciting future ahead. Glasses clinked around the private dining room of Skyline, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. I smiled confidently as James Harrington, the senior partner at Brightstone Capital, lifted his glass with genuine enthusiasm. After months of negotiations, endless sleepless nights, and countless strategy meetings, I'd finally secured a $10 million investment to launch Anderson's Coffee nationwide. My parents, Robert and Linda Anderson, sat across from me, beaming with pride. They looked happier than I'd seen them in years. Next to them was James, my mentor and now lead investor, who had always championed my vision. The champagne flowed freely, the atmosphere electric, filled with optimism and possibility. "Nathan, you've truly turned your family's shop into a national success story," James said warmly, patting my shoulder. "When Linda first called me all those years ago, desperate and worried the business was about to collapse, I couldn't imagine it would grow into this, a thriving coffee empire." 9 years earlier, I had left behind a promising career on Wall Street, where a partnership was within arm's reach, to come back home and rescue my parents' failing cafe. At the time, everyone thought I was insane, including my fiancée, who left me shortly after. But I couldn't let my parents' dreams collapse. So, I stepped in, rebuilt the brand from the ground up, negotiated partnerships, launched a robust e-commerce platform, and transformed Anderson's Coffee from a quaint neighborhood shop to a beloved national brand. My father raised his glass and addressed the room. "Nathan's vision saved this family's legacy. Linda and I never imagined our little cafe could become something so extraordinary. We're forever grateful." There was applause around the table, but I noticed my mother's brief hesitation, a shadow crossing her expression. I knew that look, well, it always meant something unpleasant was about to follow. Before I could react, she leaned closer, whispering softly enough so that only I could hear. "Honey, you've done an incredible job, but now that Sophia is back from London, she'll be stepping in as CEO. With her MBA in training, she's better suited to run a company of this scale. You've set the perfect stage for her." Sophia, my younger sister, who'd spent the last 5 years traveling through Europe, hardly ever calling home, let alone checking in on the business I'd painstakingly rebuilt. The golden child whose international degree seemed more impressive to my parents than 9 years of sweat, sacrifice, and actual results. My throat tightened and a bitter feeling crept into my chest, but I forced a composed smile as my mother gently squeezed my hand beneath the table, completely unaware of the wound she'd just reopened. "Is everything all right, Nathan?" James asked, noticing my sudden tension. "Absolutely perfect," I replied smoothly, raising my glass higher. But behind that smile, my mind was racing. I'd sacrificed everything: relationships, financial security, even my health for my parents' approval, yet after all I'd done, I was still disposable. Still secondary. Just then, Sophia swept into the dining room, fashionably late as always, her carefree laughter filling the silence. She hugged my parents enthusiastically, barely acknowledging my presence, and then took her seat, radiating the confidence of someone who had never known struggle or sacrifice. "Did I miss anything important?" she asked innocently, completely oblivious to the chaos she'd caused. "Oh no, sweetheart," my mother reassured her warmly. "We were just celebrating Nathan's wonderful groundwork. It's perfect timing, now you can finally take the reins and bring your fresh perspective." I watched the investors glance awkwardly among themselves, sensing a sudden shift in the air. James frowned slightly, clearly disturbed by this unexpected revelation. I knew exactly what he was thinking. This wasn't what he'd agreed to fund. Monday couldn't come fast enough. The pain of my family's betrayal stung deeper than I'd anticipated, and as dinner wound down, the warmth drained from my body. But in that emptiness, a fierce determination began to build. If my family thought I would quietly surrender everything I'd created, they were gravely mistaken. This time, I would fight for myself, for my legacy, and for the truth I hadn't yet fully understood, the devastating secret they'd kept hidden my entire life. That weekend felt like the longest of my life. The shock from the dinner lingered heavily, but more powerful than that was a wave of clarity, a brutal recognition of just how deep this betrayal truly ran. As I sat alone in my apartment early Saturday morning, surrounded by years of strategy files, partnership agreements, and old family photographs, I wondered how I'd been blind for so long. I glanced at an old photo of Sophia and me standing side by side outside the original coffee shop. Even then, she'd been the family favorite. I had mistaken their quiet preference for harmless affection, but now I understood it differently. Sophia represented something I apparently never could, real family lineage. Before I continue this story, though, I want to take a quick moment to connect with you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from right now? I'd love to know. Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And listen, I realize you might be watching this video alone, so let me remind you of something important. Wherever you are, whatever you're going through, you're not alone. At the very least, I'm right here with you, sharing this moment, telling this story. By noon, I decided I couldn't sit idle anymore. I called James Harrington, who immediately sensed the seriousness in my voice. Nathan, he said carefully, I won't lie, that dinner raised some serious concerns. We invested in your vision, your leadership, not Sophia's international degree. James, I replied steadily, I understand. I'd like to discuss this with you further, privately. Within an hour, we were seated in a quiet corner of a downtown coffee house, not ours, ironically. I laid everything out openly, my parents' favoritism towards Sophia, her lack of experience, and the unsettling way my mother had casually discarded nearly a decade of my life in a single sentence. James listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grave. Finally, he leaned back, taking a long, thoughtful sip of his espresso. Nathan, you're telling me you've single-handedly driven the growth, strategy, and relationships of Anderson's Coffee, and yet your parents are ready to hand over everything you've built to your sister? Exactly, I answered firmly. And James, I think I finally understand why. He raised an eyebrow curiously. I hesitated, the truth caught painfully in my throat. I overheard something I shouldn't have years ago. An argument late at night. My father shouting something about me not even being theirs. At the time, I convinced myself I'd misunderstood, but now James exhaled sharply, his face filled with both empathy and disbelief. They never told you? I shook my head, feeling a profound sense of loss and betrayal. Never. He nodded, sympathy clear in his eyes. Nathan, I'm going to be brutally honest. Brightstone Capital didn't invest in Anderson's Coffee. We invested in you. Your passion, your sacrifices, your ability to build something extraordinary. The brand has value, yes, but without you, there's no company worth investing in. A sense of validation washed over me. James wasn't family, yet his words carried more genuine respect than I'd ever received at home. What are my options? I finally asked. James leaned in close, lowering his voice. If your parents insist on this leadership change, we'll have no choice but to reconsider the investment. But listen carefully, you built the partnerships, the strategy, and the customer loyalty. If you chose to step away, most of those assets would follow you. He paused, then added deliberately, Nathan, have you ever considered starting your own brand? That simple question echoed through me, igniting a spark that quickly turned into fire. James had laid out an option I'd secretly feared, but now it seemed inevitable. The family I desperately wanted acceptance from had shown their true colors. Maybe it was time to build something for myself, something no one could ever take away from me. As I left the coffee shop, determination replaced my lingering doubts. I called my closest team members, Mark from operations, Lisa from branding, and Jackson from logistics, people who'd stood beside me from the beginning. Within moments, they agreed to meet immediately, sensing something significant was unfolding. That afternoon, around a conference table cluttered with notebooks and coffee cups, I explained the situation clearly and candidly. To my surprise, none of them looked shocked. In fact, Mark spoke up immediately. We've seen how they treat you, Nathan. Honestly, we've been preparing for something like this. Wherever you go, we go. Lisa nodded firmly. Exactly. We've always been loyal to you, not just the brand. Jackson smiled reassuringly. You're not alone in this. Their unwavering support overwhelmed me, reinforcing what I just told you earlier. None of us are truly alone. By Sunday evening, we'd formulated a concrete strategy. 2 documents lay side by side on my desk, one outlining how to move forward if my parents reconsidered their choice, and the other detailing a bold new venture, an entirely new coffee brand, built from everything I'd already created. A company I could call my own, free from betrayal and hidden family secrets. Monday morning would be decisive, I knew. Either way, my life was about to change dramatically. Yet for the first time in years, I felt ready, truly ready, to face whatever came next. Monday morning came swiftly, and with it a clarity I'd never experienced before. My heart raced as I entered the main office of Anderson's Coffee headquarters, my second home, the place where I poured nearly a decade of my life. The atmosphere inside felt charged, different somehow, as though the walls themselves knew the gravity of what was about to happen. My parents arrived shortly after, accompanied by Sophia, whose bright, casual demeanor felt painfully out of place today. My father nodded stiffly toward me, while my mother, eyes slightly red from a restless night, avoided my gaze altogether. Sophia, oblivious as always, chatted lightly about new ideas she'd read about online, completely unaware of the tension simmering just beneath the surface. The elevator chimed, breaking the strained silence, and James Harrington stepped into the lobby, accompanied by two senior partners from Brightstone Capital's legal team. Instantly, the room grew quieter still, the employees sensing something significant was about to unfold. My mother stepped forward, extending her hand warmly. "James, we're delighted you're here. Sophia has some wonderful new ideas she's excited to share." James politely shook her hand, but his gaze quickly shifted directly toward me. "Actually, Linda, we're here specifically to speak with Nathan, though it's probably best if everyone joins us in the conference room." My mother's expression froze, uncertainty flickering briefly in her eyes. Sophia's smile faded for the first time since her return, and my father simply nodded, resigned, as we all moved silently into the adjoining room. The conference table felt colder than usual, the stark glass surface reflecting tense faces around the room. James wasted no time. "Robert, Linda, I need to make something very clear. Brightstone Capital agreed to invest $10 million based exclusively on Nathan's proven track record, strategic vision, and leadership. Any significant changes to his role represent a fundamental alteration of our investment agreement." Sophia shifted uncomfortably, clearly taken aback. "I appreciate your confidence in Nathan," she interjected quickly, "but I assure you my experience overseas has prepared me." James raised a hand politely but firmly, cutting her off mid-sentence. "With all due respect, Sophia, experience isn't measured by degrees or resumes alone. It's proven through action. Nathan's actions built this company from nothing into a multimillion-dollar success. That's the leadership we invested in." My mother's face grew pale, her eyes darting nervously between James and me. She seemed genuinely surprised that my worth extended beyond family recognition. My father cleared his throat awkwardly, attempting diplomacy. "James, we understand your position, but Sophia's always been intended to step into leadership eventually. Nathan did exceptional groundwork, yes, but Sophia is family." The word family echoed sharply in my mind, reopening a wound deeper than anyone in the room could imagine. I felt something snap inside me, and before I realized it, I was standing, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "Family? You mean the same family who secretly decided I wasn't even one of you? The same family who was prepared to discard 9 years of my sacrifices simply because Sophia shares your DNA and I don't?" The room fell utterly silent. My mother's eyes widened in shock. My father lowered his gaze in shame, and Sophia looked as if the wind had been knocked from her lungs. "Nathan," my mother whispered, her voice barely audible. "How did you?" I shook my head slowly, fighting back the pain I'd held inside far too long. "Does it matter how I found out? Or does it matter more that you were ready to take everything I'd built, everything I sacrificed, and hand it to someone who hasn't invested even 1 minute in this company?" The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken finally by James's steady, confident voice. "There's a choice here, Robert, Linda. Brightstone Capital is prepared to either maintain our investment exclusively under Nathan's leadership or withdraw entirely. Moreover, Nathan has presented us with an alternative option." I reached calmly into my briefcase, pulling out the detailed business plan my team had passionately crafted over the weekend. Sliding copies toward my stunned family, I explained clearly and firmly. "If you decide Sophia will run Anderson's Coffee, you'll be doing so without my team, my partners, or the relationships I've carefully cultivated for nearly a decade. Because starting tomorrow, I'll launch a new coffee brand, one where loyalty, passion, and genuine leadership actually matter. And James has already agreed to back me fully." Sophia grabbed the documents frantically, eyes widening as she skimmed through my proposal. My father sank slowly into his chair, overwhelmed by the gravity of what they'd created. My mother, visibly shaken, searched my face desperately for signs of compromise. But there were none. "How could you do this?" Sophia demanded angrily. "You'd really sabotage your own family?" I met her gaze steadily, a profound calm settling over me. "I'm not sabotaging family. I'm finally standing up for myself. For 9 years, I gave everything I had, hoping to be worthy of a family that never fully accepted me. Now, I know exactly who I am, and who I am doesn't depend on whether or not I share your blood." James glanced calmly around the table, addressing my parents directly. Robert, Linda, your choice will determine your company's future. Nathan has Brightstone Capital's full support, whichever direction he chooses. My parents sat frozen, trapped by their own choices. But for the first time in my life, their decision no longer defined my worth. I already knew my path forward, and I wasn't looking back. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy silence. My parents, finally realizing the magnitude of their mistake, asked to meet privately at their house. A conversation I knew was inevitable yet dreaded deeply. Walking into the living room where I'd spent my childhood felt strange now, foreign somehow. My father stood near the fireplace, unable to look me directly in the eyes, while my mother sat quietly on the sofa, visibly shaken. It was clear they'd both spent sleepless nights wrestling with their decision. Nathan, my father began hesitantly, his voice heavy with regret. We owe you an apology, and the truth. I listened carefully, every muscle in my body tense, prepared for whatever revelation came next. You were adopted, my mother finally admitted softly, tears streaming down her face. We never told you because we feared you'd feel less connected to us. But keeping it hidden was the worst mistake we ever made. My father's eyes brimmed with genuine remorse. You gave up everything to save this family's legacy. Yet we foolishly held onto outdated beliefs, thinking blood mattered more than loyalty. We were wrong, terribly wrong. I stood silent for a long moment, absorbing their admission, the weight of their betrayal finally lifting slightly from my shoulders. All these years, I began slowly, I fought for your approval, believing something was fundamentally wrong with me. Now, I finally understand it was never me. It was your fear. My mother's shoulders shook gently as she nodded. Can you forgive us, Nathan? I sighed deeply, feeling the bitterness slowly begin to fade into quiet acceptance. Forgiveness might come in time, I replied honestly. But trust? That will take longer. My father stepped forward, extending his hand with humility. Will you stay? Please. Anderson's coffee belongs to you. You're the only one capable of leading it forward. For a moment, I considered accepting their plea, the child inside me desperate for their approval once again. But I knew too much had changed. I'd built this business from nothing, but it had never truly belonged to me. It had always belonged to them, tied to their conditions and their expectations. Gently, I shook my head. I can't. This business carries too much history, too much pain. I need to start something that's genuinely mine, built on values I can proudly stand behind. My father nodded slowly, clearly saddened but understanding my choice. My mother stood quietly, her tears a mixture of grief and newfound respect. 3 months later, my team and I proudly opened our doors to True North Coffee, a name chosen deliberately, a symbol of authenticity, loyalty, and self-discovery. James Harrington and Brightstone Capital stood firmly behind us, investing fully in the vision I'd nurtured all along. To my surprise, customers followed us immediately. Suppliers I'd known for years eagerly partnered with our new brand. The launch exceeded even our most ambitious expectations, and soon our coffee was on shelves nationwide, celebrated for the integrity and quality behind the brand. Sophia, humbled by the experience, eventually stepped down from Anderson's Coffee and chose instead to learn the business from the ground up, something she'd neglected earlier. My parents gradually transitioned into retirement, selling their remaining shares quietly, accepting at last that the future belonged to me. Today, standing inside True North Coffee's flagship store, watching customers happily chatting over freshly brewed cups, I realized a powerful truth. Family isn't defined solely by blood or genetics, but by loyalty, trust, and the courage to stand together through life's fiercest storms. I once thought my identity depended on acceptance from the family who raised me. Now, I know my worth lies not in the recognition of others, but within myself, and in those who chose to stand beside me when everything else fell apart. In the end, betrayal taught me resilience, and rejection taught me to choose myself. Now, every morning as I open these doors, I do so proudly, knowing I've finally built something no one can ever take away, a legacy entirely my own. Through Nathan's journey, we've seen that family isn't merely about blood. It's about loyalty, respect, and standing beside each other when it matters most. Sometimes, life's greatest betrayals lead us to discover our strongest selves, guiding us toward the people and places truly meant for us. If Nathan's story resonated with you, I would truly appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe to the channel Tapestry of Worlds, where powerful stories like these come to life every week. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did Nathan's story speak to your heart? Comment 2 below if you loved the story, or 1 if you felt differently. And remember, every subscription and like helps our channel continue bringing you stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all.